Welcome Keith to the show. Keith,
Good morning. Yeah, good morning. I'm happy to be here.
And Keith, just to sort of get our listeners into the flow of what you do, Keith is a board-certified aviation law expert. We're going to be hitting a ton of sort of aviation topics this morning, and you're also a former pilot or a current pilot?
So I still have my commercial FAA license, but I'm not current. So, and I blame that primarily on having two small children. But I used to fly for the Army, used to fly BlackHawk helicopters for about 10 years. And, recently retired. Well, recently as of 2016, retired. Not flying anymore, but, once I have the free time, I'll probably get into some civilian flying, just currently don't have the time.
Well, thank you for your service to this country. And before we get into any of the litigation stories and how you received your board certification, can you tell us a little bit about your military background and where you grew up and some of your background info?
Sure. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, Montgomery County, Maryland. My father is a retired FBI agent, also worked for the State Department. And, growing up as a kid, I was at FBI headquarters a lot, shooting guns with my dad. So it was, kind of a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And in high school, there was a program where you could work for the FBI as like an intern in the summer, a paid intern. And I got to work in the chemistry and toxicology lab. So, I was working in there with agents and scientists that were working on, high-level cases. At one point, in the lab next to the one I was in, I'm a 17-year-old kid at this point. They were bringing in, bones from the Jeffrey Dahmer case and examining them. Some of the agents I worked with worked on the Lockerbie, Scotland, terrorist case. My boss actually testified in the OJ trial, so it was pretty cool, fun stuff, and that really got me sort of the bug to get into working for the FBI and doing the same type of stuff that my dad did. So basically, after about 2 summers of doing that, they stopped the program, and I was looking at a way to sort of get my credentials ready to go work for the FBI. And that's how I found the military. So I got into University of Delaware. I had been accepted there. But before that, I signed up for the Army and basically went away to basic training right before I started. And I signed up for the Reserve/National Guard. And that's kind of how I got my start as an enlisted guy.
And when you enlisted into the military, how did you end up in aviation? So
I started out as an infantry soldier, and I spent about 5 years, worked my way up to an E5, so you go away to basic training, then you go away to basically advanced training, which is, I forget what they call it now, but for infantry enlisted stuff. And I was a gunner, I was team leader, worked my way up to a squad leader. And at the University of Delaware, basically joined the ROTC program because my father was also a Vietnam, military advisor, infantry officer, was there in 1968. So I kind of knew his route, how he got into the FBI. So I was sort of trying to mirror that. So what I did was I got commissioned right after college. And at that time, you had to have, excellent, like basically a 4.0, excellent credentials to become even an infantry officer on active duty or an aviation officer or military intelligence. And those were kind of my top 3 choices. Suffice it to say, I didn't have the pedigree, in my opinion, to make it in that selection process. So I stayed in the Guard in my unit as an infantry officer, and they basically, they send you away to Fort Benning, Georgia. You go through the infantry officer course. I did that, and I was an infantry officer until probably 2005. And I was in law school when 9/11 happened. I was in my 3rd year. Wow. We got called on active duty. I had to drop out of law school, basically on a Friday after being told on a Wednesday that, we're being called up.
I got to stop you right there because I got to, and then you please continue. So you're in law school in your 3L year.
Yeah.
9/11 happens.
Yeah.
You get a call. I mean, boots on the ground, Afghanistan, October 7th, 01. I mean, that's when TSGLI started. So I'm assuming that's when I'm sure we had other boots on the ground, but that's when they first recognized it. So that is literally the start of your 3L year. That is the same time period they say, all right.
Yeah.
All right, Keith, let's go.
My commander called me up. My brother was interviewing me for just kind of like some school project, his college school project. And he was asking me a question about, well, do you think you guys will be called up? And I said, well, National Guard hasn't been called up. And I didn't know the exact statistics, but I was like, it probably since like Vietnam, And I got my phone rang right then, and it was my commander saying, hey, you need to be here on Friday for a year, at least a year. And I said, well, I'm in law school. And he said, well, you got to quit law school for a year. So basically I went into my administration, said I got to take a leave of absence for a year. And yeah, that was it. We showed up and, we had no idea where we were going. We ended up staying stateside. We went to Bragg and did a whole train up and everything. I think 10th Mountain Division had initially fell in on Aberdeen proving grounds in the Baltimore area or north of Baltimore. And the reason they went there is because I had no idea of what was there. There was a lot of chemical weapons there, a lot of labs that, there was mustard gas that was basically sitting out on the Chesapeake Bay, and there was nothing guarding it. Nothing. So the 10th Mountain fell in on that and basically started guarding it because, at this point now, all targets, basically any military base was now a target, and certainly the more sensitive places in the D.C. area like, Aberdeen that had that stuff, Fort Detrick in Frederick, Maryland, had a lot of these sort of chemical type weapons there. So we replaced 10th Mountain. They went to Afghanistan, and we stayed there, basically guarding stuff for a year. And that, what I anticipated was it was going to be more of that if I stayed in the infantry and the National Guard. And I ran into a pilot on base and said, hey, are you guys looking for pilots? And he said, yeah. And so I went through that process, passed all the testing. And once they had a slot open up, that's when I got into aviation.
Wow. Thank you for your service. Incredible. So when do you go back to law school? What's the gap between when you're in your 3L year and when you are able to return to law school?
So because we were actually fairly close to where I was going to law school, which was in Baltimore, it was University of Baltimore. Once we sort of, initially got in, fell in on the base, built up whatever guard stations and security they had to do, there wasn't a ton of, as an infantry officer, you're kind of managing a platoon, and, each day there's really only like a team or a squad of guys on these positions, and they had to stay there for 24 hours a day. So it was kind of a, security job for our guys, and it actually gave me the ability to start taking some of the classes towards the end of the deployment, like starting up before the deployment even ended. So I'd say I was probably out for just about not quite a year, like 8 months maybe. I was able to start up and then finished kind of in the winter, and then, took the bar exam and passed in Maryland. And that's kind of where I started practicing law, was in Maryland.
And how'd you end up down here in Jacksonville, Florida?
So I started out as a public defender on the Eastern Shore in Maryland, like Salisbury, Maryland. And
great lacrosse up there, right?
Yeah, the whole area's got great lacrosse. My nephew's actually getting recruited by colleges, and he's already gotten called by Air Force and Navy, so pretty excited about that.
How did you know that?
What?
The lacrosse thing. Are you a lacrosse player?
I wouldn't claim to be. I played one year. Yeah, a couple of my boys were really good and convinced me to join my senior year, so I just kind of rode their coattails. But it was super fun. I think it's a great sport. I mean, I had an absolute blast. It's kind of like a...
Did you play defense?
No, I think I was mid.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of like a mixture between football and hockey, really. I mean, it's physical. It's a lot of cardio. I mean, it's super fun.
It's fun. Yeah. I mean, the thing now is that the stick skills, you got to develop them at a young age because it's like hockey. You think it's just run around hitting people, but it's a lot of finesse. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I ended up down there in the Eastern Shore, and there's not a lot of big firms down there. The only people that are hiring were the prosecutors or the public defender's office, and actually the prosecutor wasn't hiring. That's kind of what I envisioned that I wanted to do. But the public defender's office was hiring, and so I did it. And within a week, I was trying cases. I mean, they just throw you into the fire. And I thought it was great because, first of all, there were not a lot of expectations of you, And what I mean by that is your barometer for success was kind of doing your best and knowing that the cards were all stacked against you anyways. And, if you lost a case, a lot of times, they weren't like, how could you lose this case? It could be a guy that showed up at the courthouse for a traffic ticket and had cocaine on his seat. I mean, that was my first case where a guy got jail time and the cop walked by and saw cocaine on the seat. And I felt bad that the guy got jail time. And, my boss said to me, look, what did you expect? He had cocaine on his seat. And I said, yeah, but it feels bad when somebody that you're representing gets jail time. But it did, it opened my eyes to see a lot of, just a lot of the, I guess discrepancy in some of these cases where, look, sometimes they're arresting the wrong people or there's not a lot of evidence and people that don't have the means to hire an attorney really are looking to you to help them. I mean, some of the cases, yeah, you've got a lot of repeat offenders, but, you're handling a ton of cases, you're given a lot of responsibility. And so it kind of opened my eyes to trial law. And that was the first time where I saw myself doing something different than maybe going into the FBI. And kind of a long-winded way to get back to the answer to your question, which is while I was down there doing that, that's when a slot opened for flight school. So I went away to flight school for a little over a year. You have to go through another officer, like you got to go through aviation officer basic course. And when I was finished with that, a friend of mine from kind of college and the Northeast area was building houses in St. Augustine, Florida. It was 2006, and they were looking for an attorney to help them close all their loans because the title companies they were dealing with, they just weren't real satisfied with. And, he was like, oh, look, we're making a lot of money. This could be a great business. And we live at the beach. And I was already living at the beach in Delaware, and I figured, well, better, longer season in Florida. So that's how I ended up moving to Florida. And of course, 2008 happened. Their building company went out of business. We shut down the title company. He went back to Pennsylvania and I stayed and just was, kind of threw out my own shingle, much like yourself, had my own practice for a number of years. And then I moved up to the Jacksonville area, worked for a firm called Wood, Adder and Wolf, and was doing kind of everything. I was doing criminal defense, family law, bankruptcy, little bit of PI stuff. But,